An animation plays with words coming in from different directions reading National Council on Independent Living Oral History Project, founding member Colleen Starkloff on Nickel's pivotal role in creating better housing opportunities.
Max was living in a nursing home because we didn't have an established attendant services system in this country to provide the personal assistance people need to live in the community. There were not curb cuts. Minneapolis apparently had some curb cuts. Some advocates up there had got some curb cuts. There was no 504 money that was mandating curb cuts if you were a federal recipient. There were no lifts on buses. The affordable housing that was accessible for people with disabilities was congregate facilities that most of whom provided attendance, which actually, as it turns out, was the same idea Max was going after until Ed Roberts told him that's not what you should do. Max went to see Ed in San Francisco and learned about what advocates there were trying to do so that people with disabilities could live in the community. Max said, my God, that makes so much sense. But so there was not the congregate housing that was existing that Max and I, when we created housing in St. Louis, which ended up being congregate housing because of the funding. We got funding from HUD, and it was the HUD 202 funds, and it only allowed for elderly and disabled people to live in the housing. But we didn't have the resources to do any better, and we thought we could change it, and we couldn't. So we sold it, and it was torn down. But in the process of that, we were looking around to see what's happening for housing in the country. And we found that most people, it was like parents groups that were coming together to provide housing for their kids who didn't want to live at home, but wanted to live in the community. And what we saw really was that with the facilities providing the attendant supports, what you were just really doing was creating little nursing homes. And what was important to us was that we create advocates who are empowered to change how people lived and to work with housing developers to create housing that was integrated in the community, that was not all what we called GIMP ghettos, only disabled people living there, but disabled and non-disabled living together, and that there would be different incomes, rent strategies that could enable people who didn't have many resources but wanted to live in the community and could get their attendance through Medicaid, could live there, but not be unable to afford the rent. So there were a lot of strategies and ideas going on at that time, but there really was not integrated housing in the community unless somebody had a lot of money because of their family or because they became disabled after they made a lot of money and they could afford to really pay their own way. And that reminds me that I should say that one of the linchpin issues upon which our movement was founded, was the idea of creating an attendant system through public policy that would stand on its own, that would enable people with disabilities who needed attendance to live outside of nursing homes in housing of their choice, whether it be an apartment or a house or, whatever, that they could hire and manage their own attendance. That did not exist when we started this. That's why Max was in a nursing home. So because of the experience of the disabled people that we all allied ourselves with throughout all across the country, we began to find each other. We got involved in political campaigns because we wanted legislators to come into the Congress who would understand our needs and help us when we'd reach out and say, what about a policy that would require all places to be accessible? What about requiring policy that landlords couldn't refuse to rent to disabled people? What about federal policy that would provide access to people on planes? So we got the Air Carriers Access Act. In 1988, we amended the Federal Housing Act so that landlords couldn't discriminate against disabled people in housing. Of course, there were some slimy things that were slid in there, meaning that disabled people had to pay for their own changes and then change them back. But guess what? landlords don't change them back, but disabled people don't move out because there's not enough housing available still.